really likes to hear revert stories, and now that I've been Muslim for 2 years, I love that feeling as well. If you go to YouTube and somebody says, you've got to see this is crazy, you'll never believe this person. So because of my family relations, I'm related, my sister is married to Tony Blair, who was the former Prime Minister of Britain, and the man who joined George Bush in the worst attack on the Muslim world in 1,000 years. 1 million Muslims dead in Iraq, 100,000 at least in Afghanistan, hundreds and hundreds still being killed in Pakistan, and it goes back to the joining together of Bush and Blair. So we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us that one day there will be a Muslim in every household. And no amount of laws that put fear in us and the rest of the community can stop this. This is amazing. Did you know, I'd like to just share some statistics with you. Since 9/11, it is estimated that there are 500,000 revert Muslims in America. 500,000. I think it's probably double that. Wallahi. In Britain, tiny little island, you might have heard of it, capital city is London, we have 100,000 new Muslims since 2001. And I'm one of them, alhamdulillah. So I'd like to tell you how I come to be standing here in a hijab and dressed modestly as a Muslimah. I grew up in North London in the 1970s, and my parents were both, broadly speaking, Christians. My father was a lapsed Catholic. He'd lost his Catholicism, mostly through alcohol. And my mother was a superstitious Christian. So she would not pray, she would not go to church, but she liked buying crosses and hanging them around the house to keep away evil spirits. So this was the atmosphere that I was born into. And looking back, what's interesting to me is that still I remember praying every night of my childhood. Every night I would put my hands together and say, "Dear God, please take my younger sister Emma away. Not forever, just for a few days, God, please." And there were other prayers as well. But the feeling that I now understand is fitra, was the absolute certainty that children have that God exists. But guess what? Our society, this modern age, everything around us is geared at smashing that belief. And it was the same in Britain when I was a child. It's very hard to hold on to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls the rope of belief that will bring us to Him. So although I was devout as a child, you get to around 10 years old and you start to get mocked. You start to get laughed at by your peer group. I remember I would have a sleepover, and a friend, when I started to say, "Dear God, please," they'd laugh at me. "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm praying." "We're praying to the big man in the sky with the beard." That's stupid. And you start to feel like an idiot. Without anybody to guide you, without any form to this lovely faith that the child has, it will die. But Allah knows best, and He will guide whom He wills. So what did I know growing up about Islam? Well, until 9/11, I'd only ever met 3 Muslims. They were all girls and they went to my girls' school. And from watching them for 5 years, I had only 3 pieces of knowledge about Islam that I thought were correct. Knowledge 1, all Muslims come from Pakistan. Knowledge number 2, all Muslim girls have long shiny black hair. And my third piece of knowledge about Islam was this: all Muslim girls are very good at maths and they're going to be doctors when they leave school. That was it. That was Islam to me. I'd probably be a bit angrier at myself for my lack of knowledge, except that I think for most of Britain, it's the same today. That's what they think it is. That and terrorism. When you become a Muslim, people love to know what was the moment that your eyes opened. What was the moment that you felt that you were guided towards this faith? And I've thought about this moment a lot. And I know it to be this moment. I'll share it with you now. In the year 2000, I was a new mother for the first time. I had a 1-month-old baby in December 2000. Her name was Alexandra. I was sitting at home and I was watching the evening news. And a photograph came onto the evening news. And it was one of those that stops your world. You know, in the 70s in America, there was another picture that stopped America. It was of a young girl who had napalm on her back. Remember that? She was running screaming from her flaming village. Horrific photo. And that really stopped a war. Well, this just stopped me. And the photo was this. It was the back of a young man. A boy, really. 15 years old. And he was wearing a t-shirt and jeans. But in his right hand, he had a stone. And that hand was raised like this, as if he was going to throw it. And his back was so straight. And his arm was so strong. And his head had such dignity in its angle of it. And it was hard to believe, with the bravery of this boy with the stone, that just a few meters from him was a tank, and the tank was pointing its gun directly towards him. That boy's name was Faris Odeh. Faris Odeh came from a place I'd never heard of until that moment. It was called the Rafah refugee camp in the Gaza Strip. Now, I didn't know this at the time, just watching that image and being moved by it. But 9 days later, 15-year-old Faris Odeh was shot in the neck by an Israeli sniper for throwing stones at tanks, and he died. Nobody remembers, nobody mourns, but I remember, and Allah remembers. Allahu Akbar. So that was a moment that stayed with me, and it's the only explanation that I can give you, except that Allah guides us, and He makes plans, and they are the plans that you will follow. For what happened next? 5 years later, I walked into the office of my boss at the Mail on Sunday newspaper. In 2005, I was a successful journalist. I had a photo byline in a newspaper, which is kind of like the Hollywood movie star of the press. It's a good thing to have. I walked into his office and I said, "Peter, I'd like to go to Palestine. I want to cover the elections there, and I'll write about it for you." Now, you know what? My boss should have laughed at me, because at that point I was writing about lifestyle, hair, clothes, family life, housing. I was not writing about the Middle East. But he said, "Yeah, that's a good idea. Here's a blank check for your expenses. Go for 2 weeks, I'll give you 4 pages in our magazine." Suddenly, middle of January 2005, I was standing outside Tel Aviv airport in what is known as Israel. I only had 3 phone numbers in my pocket of people in Ramallah who might be able to get me to meet the man who was going to be the leader of the Palestine Authority, Mahmoud Abbas. 3 phone numbers on a bit of paper. There I was, standing outside Tel Aviv airport. And a car pulled up, a taxi, And the man got out, the driver, and he said to me, marhaba, which means, hey, hi, in Arabic. He said, my name is Jamal. You can call me Jimmy. I said, hey Jimmy, how you doing? He said, I'm fine. Where are you going? I said, I'm going to somewhere called Ramallah. Do you know it? He said, yeah, I know it. Get in the car. I'll drive you there. In the next hour and a half, Jimmy Jamal gave me a class called Occupation 101. He tried to outline 64 years of Israeli persecution of Arab Palestinians. It was a great class. He did a good job. I remember though, as we got out of Jerusalem and we curved into the beautiful landscape of the Holy Land, those wonderful hills that you see. And I noticed that the road became bumpier the nearer we got to what they call Palestinian territories. But up on the hillside was a lovely flat road and nobody was on it. And it seemed to be going the same way. I said to my driver, Jamal, I said, I don't want to tell you your job, but why don't we take that road in the same direction? It's empty and I'm getting a bit car sick. He looked at me and said, yeah, okay, we could take that road if you want. But if we go on that road, we'll be shot dead in around 2-3 minutes. You still want to go on that road? I said, no, I don't want to go on that road. He explained that that road was for Jews only. No Arabs, no Palestinians, the lower class of person could go on that road that was for Jews only. And he said the joke's on him because being a Palestinian from Jerusalem, his taxes paid for a road that he could never use. Immediately the word apartheid came into my mind. That's what apartheid is. We got to our first checkpoint soon afterwards. And the checkpoint was manned by a group of young soldiers, and one of them came over to the car. He looked with disgust at Jamal, put his gun towards him. And the young man in the Israeli uniform was from a place not far from here, Brooklyn. Did you know that kids from Brooklyn can serve in the Israeli army? Weird, huh? So he pointed his gun at Jamal, he took my passport, and he looked at it and he went, hey, Britain, we love you guys. I've never felt so ashamed in my life. At the checkpoint, Jamal explained that he couldn't take me to my hotel in Ramallah. The checkpoint was as far as he could go. Because being Palestinian, he can't travel his land. He can only stay in a section that the Israeli Authority allows him to stay in. He can't go to the West Bank. He can never go to Gaza. I got out and I walked through the checkpoint on my own. I got in another taxi and I got to my hotel. And that night, I cried myself to sleep. Imagine, I thought that was as bad as it gets in Palestine. An apartheid road system. And an American in an Israeli uniform. And a checkpoint. And every day of my life, I wish that was all that it was. The next day, I had to get on with my job and I needed to meet Mahmoud Abbas. So I was in journalism mode. So I rang the 3 numbers on the bit of paper. Some guys with names I couldn't. My English tongue couldn't say. Mustafa Hamdullah. It's like, where are the vowels in these names? Ibrahim. I called them. And it worked. Somehow, I was surrounded by Mahmoud Abbas's guard. Every leader to be going into election has a security, right? Well, the security for Mahmoud Abbas is 2 huge Arabs. Kind of movie extra kind of size. I remember they got me into an elevator that was made of metal. My handbag was taken, my phone was taken. I stood there feeling very vulnerable, and they pulled the metal screen across. And at that point, the walkie-talkie of the man on my right went, and he picked it up. And he said something that sounded like this. And in my mind, the subtitles came up, "We'll kill the white woman later." Because I was afraid. All I'd learned about Arabs and about Muslims was that they kill white people because they hate us. Just they hate us. I thought I was liberal. I thought I had some knowledge. But when I was in that position, I was expecting to die. But you know, they say a week is a long time in politics. Let me tell you, 72 hours in Palestine is a very long time. There is a reason for the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that talk about the barakah of the land of Palestine, of Sham. Because as a non-Muslim, you feel it. You don't know what it is, but you set foot there and you want to stay. And you feel love. And within 72 hours, I would have died for any man, woman or child that I met in Palestine. Such was the love that they gave a stranger. As I say, 72 hours is a long time in Palestine. I met Mahmoud Abbas, and I did the interview. And that feeling that I had in Palestine did not leave me, and I felt so passionate about the apartheid and the injustice there that I felt myself becoming an activist. My husband at the time said, you know, you need to back off. This is dangerous territory. There's a lot of pressure on people who get involved in Palestine, but there are times, if you're being called by Allah, and every one of you needs to recognize when you're being called back to Allah, please, inshallah, you have no choice. So I tried to get on with my life. I wrote my articles, I came back to where I was living in France with my kids, but strange things kept happening. One of these weird things was, in 2006, I got an email, and it amazed me, because it came from a political party beginning with the letter H in Lebanon. Does anybody know what? Don't shout it out. Just put your hand up if you know. Don't all shout the name out. That would be bad. Because you know we're in the land of the free and words are dangerous here, right? So I'm not going to go down that road. But I got an email from their media department. They have a media department. Everybody's on Facebook these days. You'd be amazed. Don't visit their Facebook page either. And it said, look, come and appear on our TV station. We find your stance on Iraq very interesting. And I thought, wow, going to Lebanon to meet those guys. Okay. And what was I expecting? Still in my mind, I had that bit of preconception about what Islam was and who the people of Islam were. Because when I arrived in Beirut airport in 2006, I was sure I was going to be met by big beards. That's how I thought of them. Big beards, brown turbans. I was looking at the airport for men in cloaks, maybe with whips. I think I've been watching too much Indiana Jones. I was looking, and then 3 young sisters in the hijab came up to me, and they were the sassiest women you've ever met in your life. Their attitude was like this: ain't nobody telling me what to do. I'm married. Forced marriage? I don't think so. I marry who I like, as long as it pleases Allah and my father. I thought, is this Islam? Really? Over 6 days, I spent a lot of time with these sisters. They were called Zainab, Zainab, and Zainab, but I'm sure they have other names in Lebanon. They were politically active. They were highly academic, studying engineering, journalism, political science. And I watched them. I watched the interplay with the men around them. And And it was the first time I'd seen female students opt out of showing their bodies in order to impress men. And I was impressed by them. The men kept their distance. Some of them didn't, some of them even looked at the ground politely when they spoke. And there was no oppression. In fact, these women were running it. I was amazed. And it changed my view of what the hijab was. And after 6 days, I realized that I'd gone from Arabophobia to hijab envy. I wanted to be a hijabi, but without the Islam. I realized that banking on a fading appeal to men in order to get work, wow, that's cheap. But it's what we're told to do in our society. In fact, there is a lot of statistics that show the more flesh you reveal, the better the job you get as a woman. Is that equality? The more flesh you reveal, the more beautiful you make yourself to your boss, the higher your wage. Is that equality? No. When I came back to the UK, I wanted to write about my hijab envy. I'd had this interesting experience. I crafted a really good article. I called my editor. I said, Peter, I've got a great article, hijab envy. It's about how good the hijab is. He said, nope. Nah, it's not our thing. Okay. I must have called 40 editors in the next 2 weeks. Magazines, Sunday magazines, daily magazines, quarterlies, monthlies, dailies, newspapers. Nobody would touch it because it went counter the narrative that the hijab oppresses women and it's forced on them by men. Anyway, it took me 2 years, but I did get the article in the newspaper. I managed to do it by withholding my column for a very long time. My deadline was 4 p.m. on Friday, 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m., editor on the phone, I pressed send. That's how I got it in. But that's how hard it is to counter the current narrative. Alhamdulillah. Everyone who comes to Islam has to have a relationship with the Holy Quran. And I'd like to share with you now, before we break for Asr, how I came to begin my relationship with the Quran. In 2007, I'd had a very, very disturbing, upsetting visit to Gaza. If you come to me afterwards, I'll tell you what happened. But what Israel is doing there, believe me, it's a concentration camp. It's way beyond apartheid. In fact, Desmond Tutu said, what's happening in Palestine is worse than any apartheid that he'd experienced. Desmond Tutu. So I came out to Jerusalem. I was kind of depressed, I was stressed, it was raining, and I had 40 minutes to get all my souvenir shopping. A young Palestinian man fell into step next to me. And he said, Marhaba. I said, Marhaba. And a mean thought came into my head. And I've been ashamed of it every day since. I thought, I don't want to buy a rug off this kid. And then I thought, you know what? The Palestinians deserve better from you. They've always treated you with respect. And they've always looked after you in their land and in their villages. Stop and speak to this young man. So I stopped myself. I said, sorry, brother, I'm in a rush. I need to get some souvenirs. What do you need to get? He said. Okay, I need to buy 2 toy camels for my daughters. I need a ceremonial Arabic knife for my husband, a Yasser Arafat mother of pearl picture, and a Quran in English. Can you help? Absolutely, he said. All of these brothers are my uncles. We shall go and get them at once. Come with me. We dived in and out of every single shop along the old route of Old Jerusalem. We drank so much mint tea, I'm sure I nearly had diabetes at the end of it. Have it with less sugar, guys. You're killing yourselves. And 40 minutes later, I was standing in the rain with bags full of all of that list and much more. And I turned to this young man who I'd never seen before. Never. And I would never see again. I said to him, thanks, how much do I owe you? He looked at me and said, no, This is a gift from the people of Palestine to you. Don't forget us when you go. And that's how I got my first Quran, a gift from the people of Palestine. And I'd like to share with you what happened when I opened it and the rest of how I came to Islam after Asr, inshallah.